Hello everyone and welcome back to Your Next Episode, where we aim to support, inform and entertain the midlife population through discussions each week with experts or interesting people. I'm Louise.
And I'm Amy.
And today we're talking step families, which is something that comes up a lot amongst my midlife friends. 1 in 3 UK families are now step families or blended families, and it's a complex issue because each family is unique. So today we're joined down the line by Professor Lisa Doodson, who is the founder of the UK's only research-based step family resource centre called Happy Steps. Lisa is a chartered psychologist, an author and an absolute expert in step family dynamics. She recently took part in the BBC documentary about Rio Ferdinand and his wife Kate's experience of becoming a step family, and I highly recommend watching that on iPlayer. It's really honest and quite moving. I found it quite moving, and I think very valuable for anyone in this situation. Today, Lisa's going to share some insights that you'll find really useful if you're part of a step or blended family, and that may be extended family too. There's also going to be a whole stack of information from this episode in the show notes because we can't fit everything in, so do look there for lots more resources. But for now, finally, after that long preamble, welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Louise. That's very kind. It was a very lovely introduction.
Can we get straight into understanding, first of all, the myths versus the realities of step families?
So I think that it's really interesting when I sort of see clients and couples come to me for help. Generally, they come to me about 2 years in. If I had a pound for every sort of 2 years, I'd be doing quite well. So
you mean really 2 years into their relationship, that's when they realise that actually they need to perhaps get a bit of help.
Exactly, and I think the reason for that is everyone goes into relationships with step family, where there's children, thinking, oh, it'll be fine. I love my partner, I love children. What can possibly go wrong? It'll be fine. And I guess the point is it's about unrealistic expectations, and people enter into these relationships thinking, yeah, I can do it. And they're sort of flawed by not understanding the dynamics and the reality of living in that family, because it's complex. There are 3 areas that really, I think, come up again and again in conversations and issues and sort of difficulties. One is, what's your role? So as a step parent coming in, what am I? Am I a mum? Am I a dad? What is this step thing? What is it? Is it a friend? So that's the first area. And then the second is dealing with ex-partners, because you don't have the luxury of having this tidy little family. There's other people that are involved. And then the third area is obviously the children. It's sort of what's your relationship with the children? Should you discipline them? Should you step back? What do you do? What if you can't get that close relationship? How long do you keep trying? It's those complexities, and really everything else fits around that. You can almost sort of say, yeah, that's to do with your role. That's to do with, being a sort of the step, the children, or it's to do with the ex-partner. And it's those 3 that keep coming back into the challenges.
I guess each family is unique, isn't it? And I guess there's many variations on being a step parent or a step child, step sister, step brother, and then obviously the extended family, the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles. I guess we'll need to be quite generalised over this podcast. Each situation is very different. But could you explain the main issues that come up over and over again?
Yes, Amy. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it really isn't just you as a couple. It's this sort of, it's a bit like the ripple effect. You throw a stone in the water and it hits everybody. And no one's got a rule book. If you're the grandma, and your son, daughter, their relationship sort of has ended and they've remarried or repartnered, there's no rule that says how do you manage the relationship with your ex-daughter-in-law or ex-son-in-law, or how do you make sure you're not leaving someone out who's sort of newly trying to get used to being part of the family. So it definitely is about this wider relationship and sort of group of people that you've got to bring with you on that journey. And I think when you ask what are the issues, I think one of the problems is that people expect things to happen quickly. So if you take the Rio and Kate, they sort of fell in love. They were sort of building their family together. On the programme, for those that watched it, Rio had a stern talk with his dad. Said, "You're giving her a hard time. Back off, help her."
She sadly passed away, and then he met someone else, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah, and I think his dad, as most parents in that situation would be, was wanting to look out for his son, but also his grandchildren. And so, I guess he was testing Kate. Is she good enough? Is she going to hang around? Is she going to let them down? They've been hurt before. I don't want them hurt again. Rio's point was, well, if you keep doing it, it's going to get. She is going to leave because she's not going to be able to cope.
And it's really complex, isn't it? People's emotions. Yeah. His dad has got a totally different focus to him and to her, and
absolutely, and it's not wrong.
No,
but I think it's about understanding the timing of things. So if you meet your partner, you're in control of that, but you're not in control of everyone else. So the children, whether their parents died or whether they're still around but not living together, they're grieving for that loss. And friends are grieving for that relationship that they had with you. And how do they recreate a new one? You're not replacing ex-partners, you've just you're moving on, and so they still exist, whether it's in the minds of people or physically. And it goes on and on. So actually, I think one of the main things people, I would if you took away one piece of advice, it's take things slowly and recognise that they've got to get there in their own time, and it may not be at the same pace, or it probably won't be at the same pace of you as you.
Actually, Kate said in the programme that when it was just the five of them together, they were fine. But then it was, outside influences that put the pressure on. And actually, I hadn't even thought about it. It must be bloody exhausting because you've got each other's parents, ex-parents-in-law and friends as well. You're saying about friends. So once you've done that, you've then got to introduce your friends, and it's just
exactly. And and you're not I don't think I've ever I know I haven't spoken to any stepmom or stepdad and they've wanted to replace the parent. They haven't. It's it's accept me as I am. I'm not going to be the same as your mum, your dad, whoever, but I'm me, and I'm going to do the best I can. And I think it's so hard because most people want to do the right thing. We want to do the right thing for children, but we're all learning and we're all sort of hurting in some way as well. So if people are rejecting you, perhaps the children aren't accepting you, it's very difficult.
And I guess when you do meet somebody, those two, actually we're talking about those two individuals at the core of this issue, and that they meet each other and they just fall madly in love, and you don't want to slow down in that circumstance. Exactly. You just want everything to be so fast, but I guess you have to be patient.
Exactly. I mean, you can still develop your relationship, but I think it's about taking it slowly in terms of introducing everybody, and also recognising if they're not ready, don't just shut the door and say, well, we're not going to see those friends again, or we're not going to, introduce grandparents or whatever. Give them a chance, because actually they are grieving for their loss, whatever that loss is, and give them a chance to try again, and to just keep trying, not hurting yourself too much, but actually trying that door, offering something, and then retreating if they're not ready.
I think it's really helpful for people to think of it as recognising that those people are grieving something that they've lost. And somebody doesn't have to have died for that to happen. It's a situation, a setup that has now changed, and they're grieving that. So that might then sort of help you be a bit more patient with it, I guess.
I think so. Because when we're anxious and when we're feeling wobbly, we're not feeling so great, it's hard to think of others at that point. You think of yourself, because that's the human need. You need to fix yourself. But actually, if you can just stand back and think, my stepson, he wasn't rude to me because he hates me. He's missing his mum, or he's missing his dad, or he doesn't quite know how to handle this, and he's only little. Let's give him a break, and I'll go and do something else. It's very difficult.
Can we talk about trying to get stepchildren to like you, which I know sounds really sort of basic, but that's what everybody wants to do. And can we think about teenagers? Are teenagers harder than small children in that situation, do you think?
Yes, definitely. I mean, are teenagers more difficult? I think you could have stopped there.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah,
Stupid
teenagers are
question.
very difficult. No, actually, the research shows that they are more difficult. It's much easier with younger children because younger children, they need looking after. They don't do things on their own because that's dangerous.
Yeah.
You have to help them. So they're easier to sort of bundle up and move between homes or whatever, and you can
give them an ice cream, and that sort of sorts things out.
Exactly. Teenagers, quite rightly, are starting to challenge the world around them. That's normal. They're becoming adults, but that means it's more difficult. So if they challenge you, why did you leave Dad? Why did you leave Mum? I don't like it here. I don't want to do whatever. Those are normal questions, and you have to sort of be able to answer them appropriately. And it's, sadly, there's no one answer because all children are different and all relationships, it's about managing the complexities of where you are. But I guess one piece of advice is remember they are children. They are not thinking as adults. So often we try and put our feelings onto adults. So, for example, if you've been part of a breakup, you will automatically feel guilty, and you might think the children will hate you because of that. And the chances are they won't because they don't understand what's happened. And if they're old enough to understand, they're probably old enough to realise that relationships go wrong.
Yeah. Yes.
So, so I think don't try and overanalyze something. Children are also quite clever. They're quite basic in feelings. So if you're trying to trick them, trying to make them like you, they're gonna realise that's not who you are.
Yeah.
You can't be fake all of the time. So really, my advice would be just be yourself. Don't try too hard. I have a lot of step mums that I've seen over the years, and there's this sort of, I call it like the yo-yo effect. They try really hard at the beginning. And because they don't get back what they think they've put in, they then retreat. And then they feel left out, they feel isolated, so they try again. And it's sort of this constant, wanting to be liked, feeling hurt, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
So, I guess my advice would be yourself. If you're struggling, talk to your partner, be honest with your partner, because if you're finding it hard to bond with the children, and there's, we have to be honest here, you're not going to love them instantly. You're not.
No.
You don't have a bond with them. So you've got to build that bond. And it may be that personality-wise, you don't get on with one of them, but the other one you do. Try and just work on what's going well. So if you get on with somebody, maybe it's because you've got something in common. Build on that so that will sustain you if things get more difficult. And accept that things aren't going to be perfect, but just try and just be yourself. But keep communication lines open. So always talk to your partner and try and have an open conversation, which is, I'm not blaming them. I'm not, but I just need to, explain how I feel, because that again, it's better not to bottle things up.
No. You've written a book specifically for stepmums. What I'm wondering is there a maternal expectation that as women we put on ourselves and other people as well, especially if they're sort of younger children, that's sort of like, well, I should feel maternal towards them and I should, and everybody else looking and going, well, you're a woman, you should be mothering these children.
Yeah.
I just wonder why you specifically wrote a book for stepmums.
Stepmoms. Yeah, well, I mean, you're partly right, Louise. But the reason I actually focused on stepmoms was when I was doing my research many moons ago. There was actually a gap in our knowledge of stepmoms. We had lots of research on stepdads.
Really? Oh, right.
Yeah, and if you think about it, national statistics historically and really still now would count families where often it would be the mum, and then if the children would continue living there, and then she might repartner. So we had statistics for that family, but what we didn't have statistics for was when the dad goes off and then repartners,
Right.
because actually the children didn't reside there.
Oh, I see.
So, so people that were clinicians or researchers couldn't find those people because they weren't registered anywhere.
No, they were sort of counted
So
as that's the family with the mum, and that's that.
Exactly.
So I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was a real gap in our knowledge, and so I conducted the largest study on stepmoms some time ago, 15 years ago, and it was eye-opening for me to find out about this sort of lost group, really, because no one had really counted them before or asked how they felt. And I found that they had they had a higher level of anxiety, which, is stress, but it's specifically anxiety. It's that sort of tight feeling in your tummy, those sort of butterflies. And so my research was based on that, and I spoke with hundreds of stepmoms, and as part of that, I've never been a researcher that just wants to sort of have the research on the shelf. It's about how do you help people. So I wrote the book and then set up Happy Steps so that it's a resource which contains my research but sort of helps hints and tips and that sort of thing. So people can go to it as a resource, and if they want me specifically, I can help. But really it's about go and find things, make yourself feel a bit better and stronger so that you can sort of carry on and keep making your family better and more integrated, really.
So, Lisa, can I ask you about toxic exes? I mean, an ex being continuously difficult about decisions around discipline and maybe even actively turning children against a step-parent.
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, it's one of the top issues that I have to deal with, and it's really difficult because often the couple that I'm working with are not the toxic ex. They're the couple who are tearing their hair out, going, we're doing our best, but the ex is being really mean. She won't let us have access, or she's constantly, just sticking the knife in, really telling the kids that X, Y, Z. So it's really difficult. I guess there are different ways of dealing with it. If it's really bad, I would always suggest trying to get some mediation.
Yeah.
I know people sort of talk about it and perhaps ignore it and think, it's all to do with courts or whatever. It's not. If you can find a good mediator, and there are lots of them around, they can really help. It's about helping people get things off their chest. Often their actions are because they're hurting.
I was going to say, I mean, that obviously the label of toxic ex, they're toxic for a reason. There's damage there, isn't there?
Yeah. They're not really horrible people. Most people are just, they feel hurt. They feel that, they've been left, everyone else is moving on. They're feeling sad. And the trouble is that affects the children, breakups, relationship breakups, divorce, whatever. Generally speaking, it doesn't harm children. It's the ongoing conflict that harms the children. Right. So if you can move on and have as amicable as possible, it's going to be difficult in the early days, but if you can start building bridges and, accept that children are better off if they can see both parents, if you have that at the front of your mind, then hopefully your actions are a bit more balanced. Yeah. Having constant issues, I mean, even in this situation we're in at the moment with this isolation.
I was just going to say, this lockdown must be actually a bit of a pressure cooker for a lot of blended families or, step families.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard that people are using it, to stop the children seeing the other partner. And whether we agree with that or disagree, it shouldn't be foremost. We should be saying, particularly at this time, children need to feel safe and secure. And if that means even being able to talk to their other part, the absent parent on video or whatever, whenever they want, they should be allowed to, because we've got to try and help everybody. And maybe it's a good thing. This is going to help us actually realise what's important.
I'd like to ask you about step-sibling bonding, step-brothers and sisters introducing, like, say, one person's got 3 kids, the other person's got 3 kids. Is there any specific advice around that?
Well, I guess the first point is that, if you've got a biological family, the children generally are all the sort of, you have them all sort of 2 or 3 years gap, and they're all of that sort of age. The tricky thing with step families is you could have any sort of gap then, because you could have, I've had families where they've got a child each that's exactly the same age, and that can be good because obviously they could get on, but equally they can be actually the worst of, enemies really, because they're challenging each other. So I guess accept that you can have quite tricky gaps. You might have sort of a baby and you might have a teenager, and then it's tricky to get them all involved in the same thing. I would say don't expect, with any sibling, it doesn't mean they're going to get on just because they're related. But let them, try and encourage them to have time together, because it's about building memories. Yeah. So a family, all our families are about building those precious memories. That's our history. So try and do things together, not all the time. You all need space. We all need space, ideally. But give everybody a chance to get to know each other. Try and develop your own sort of little rituals. So, I don't know, Christmas is a good one. Put the tree up together, wait for everybody to get together and do something together, or have a pizza Friday and you make pizzas together, or, whatever it is. I'm not, it doesn't really matter, but it's about doing something together and trying to find things that everyone can contribute to.
I think that's so true. I mean, you said there, like, families are built on memories, and even if it kind of kicks off a little bit or there's an argument, that is a memory, isn't it? That you can look back on and say, oh God, do you remember when so and so really lost their minds or whatever? Yeah. But I guess the thing you're saying is not to just stay away from, not to avoid contact altogether, so those memories can't be made.
Exactly. I think the worst thing you can do is actually keep them separate. So I've heard, sometimes it's sort of like mum will take her kids at the weekend, dad will take his kids, and they'll do different things. And actually, you're not being a step family then. You're just a couple who has a relationship, but you're not a step family. Yeah. It's, you're two single parents parenting your own children, and that's okay if that's what you want, but you will never be integrated. You will never have that bond as a family, and some of that bond, like you say, might be negative, and there might be, things might kick off, but actually there might be some really nice things in relationships that develop and become really precious.
There were some fabulous examples in the Rio and Kate Ferdinand programme of when they went to that group and they were sitting around, and there were quite a few kids there who recognised the wonderful things that had come out of this blending of families. So, which was sibling relationships, step-sibling relationships.
No, you're absolutely right. And particularly when there's been a loss, when a mum or a dad's died, to have other people that love you and care for you is such such an amazing thing. So, we have to try and create that if we can, and it's not always easy, but definitely worth trying.
Can I hone in on what if you are in a situation where you are the reason that a couple have split or divorced? For example, if I had an affair with a man, he left his wife for me, and the children know this, and they know that that's why mum and dad split up. I mean, we know that there's a build-up to that, but what about those situations where a couple have had an affair while they've been in their relationships, come together, the kids are fully aware of that, and basically are going to think that the other person caused the breakup of their parents' marriage? How do people deal with that?
So it's difficult, but I don't know, it's an interesting one, Louise. I mean, just thinking about it, out of all the couples, and I've seen a lot of couples, it's very rare that comes as an issue where the children are causing causing them grief because of it. It's interesting. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Of course it does. And I guess what tends to happen is I don't think children generally bear grudges. I think children are very honest and they'll deal with what they have in front of them. They are led by adults, and so if, for example, dad's left mum and dad's got a new girlfriend and mum's on her own and mum's really sad and all the time and in a bad place, the children will feel very protective of mum and will resent new woman. Yeah. They will. Yeah. But as long as everyone helps mum move on, and actually in a year's time mum's in a better place, and actually everything starts to calm down, they won't generally hold it against anyone, as long as people are trying their best.
So it comes back to that, not trying to rush everything, taking your time and recognising, maybe if children are being funny towards you, that actually that's because they're being very protective of their mum, who is very hurt, or dad or whatever. So
exactly. And I think, it's, don't expect it's really age dependent and depends on the sex of the child as well, because girls might be a bit more sort of in touch with their emotions, maybe maybe not, but it's about giving them the information they need. So it's not about sharing everything, because they're children and they shouldn't. None of us know what goes on in a relationship, and maybe those are sorts of things to say. Look, it was difficult. We weren't happy, and you move on and say, that's between your mum and I, or your dad and I, and But let's agree not to talk about it while we're here. We'll just we'll just do whatever. But it's finding ways of addressing it if necessary, but not assuming the children need to know everything.
No.
They certainly don't, particularly younger children.
Yeah.
It's interesting, as you're talking, Lisa, I'm thinking of something that happened years and years ago to some friends that I knew who probably won't listen to this, so I can spill the beans. So obviously, exactly that scenario you just set up there, where mum has been left and felt obviously rejected and awful. And she filled those kids, there were 2 kids and they're quite young at the time, she filled their head with so much poisonous shit and about the dad and about the woman that he had left her for over the years and years and years. Now those children are now sort of in their 20s, and after some therapy have kind of understood the situation for what it was back then. And mum hasn't come out of it so well because, again, somebody might be listening to this and it might strike a little bell there that you are in pain and you are hurting. And I can imagine it's so tempting to say, your fucking father this and da-da-da-da. I can imagine that. Yeah. But I guess you have to remember about the long game, that how you all acted in that as that child grows up from being 7, 8, 9, 10. Then all of a sudden they're in their 20s and maybe thinking, oh, hang on a minute, that wasn't handled so well by mum.
Yeah. And you can't change it then, because it's, so much time has passed. Yeah. And then the children could resent it because, that mum may have affected their relationship with their dad. Yeah. And it's sad. It's really sad. So I think the more you can try, like you say, play the long game, but just be, try and put the kids first, or at least, I mean, you have to build your relationship. So, it's not about saying, right, well, I'll forgo any relationship. I've always got to put the children first. I'll stay where I am then. I'm not suggesting that. We all deserve to be happy. But, think about the children, and the most important thing is that they have a relationship with both parents, as long as it's a healthy relationship and there's no harm. They can make their own choices, so if dad's moved and been a horrible man because he's left mum and actually, his new partner is horrible, well, that's fine. The children will deal with it. They'll work it out. Yeah.
Okay.
But let them do it.
I just wanted to ask you about the sort of research around couples' relationships. I'm talking about the new relationship. Are those couples more likely to sort of fall apart, those relationships, when you've got stepchildren involved?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question, actually, Louise, because there's a sort of a point of real positivity, I suppose. Some research has suggested that couples in that second relationship, where the first one's fallen down, are actually happier. Right. And that makes sense, because they clearly, if they were unhappy, they're now happier. And I think also we're aware, for any of us that have gone through a first relationship breakup and that meant a lot, and then you've moved on, you sort of know what went wrong. So you're much more mature, you're much more able to sort of perhaps put someone else first or whatever, Yes. Be a bit more adult. So people are happier, which is a good thing. Relationships are more likely to break up when there are children involved. So it's the children that cause the added stress. So I think knowing that, it's not about the partner relationship, but it's about knowing being forewarned, if you like. So yes, the children can cause stress. So we know, my own research showed that this increased anxiety. So again, my advice would be for couples to address those things, because if you can reduce anxiety, work out what the issues are, reduce the anxiety, you'll be able to feel happier, more able, more in control. That creates this cycle of sort of better relationships, the anxiety reduces, and so on and so on. So really it's about not putting your head in the sand. It's about saying, okay, I would like it to be better, but I'm struggling. And just putting your hand up and saying, I'm struggling, whether I've got resentment or even if it's embarrassing, you don't like those feelings, accept it and deal with it, and we can do that. I promise, everyone can do with it. But it does take that, being brave.
It probably, I'm sure, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Lisa, but it may be worth, if you're in that situation, I'm thinking as what we would call the toxic ex before, the person who's been left behind, working on yourself, maybe getting some therapy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And, I think people do, and we're very good at healing as well. If we meet someone else or we talk to friends, we don't necessarily need a therapist. I mean, if we've got good friends who listen to us, but actually push back sometimes. And if we feel our friends being unreasonable, maybe just sort of say, maybe try not doing that. You might feel better if you just sort of forget him for the time being. Those sorts of things can be harder to do, but it's kinder, really.
Yeah. It reminds me of something that Arabella Ware said. There's a big name drop for you. When we went to meet her and chat to her a few episodes ago, and she was saying you need those friends who are going to say, what's your part in this? Yeah, I know he's a shit. He left. The one that he left you for is this and that and da-da-da. But what's your part in this?
Brilliant. That's exactly it. I think we all learn, don't we? We all learn through breakups, and it's never good for anybody, and we have to build ourselves back again, and it's horrible. But over time, it can be a good thing because we learn about ourselves, and then we hopefully meet other people, and that we get stronger, and you look back and think, wow, I've come a long way. Yeah. So that's a really positive thing.
So the stuff that we've discussed today, a lot of that is presumably what is the content of your workshops. Can you just explain to us briefly, what you offer? I know workshops, one-to-ones, all of that sort of thing.
Basically, what I try and do through Happy Steps, I recognise that people have different ways of learning and want to do different things. So you can just go on Happy Steps and have a look at, there's various sort of articles and things you can just read. Obviously, there's my books, How to Be a Happy Stepmom or Understanding Step-Parents. There's also a self-help guide, so you could sort of work through it with your partner in your own home at your own pace. So that's available online. I do run workshops, but I do recognise that actually it's hard to find the right locations because people are all over the country, clearly. So those are quite tricky. And I tend to do one-to-ones amazingly online, which I was obviously ahead of my time, really.
Because that's all we're doing now.
That's all we're doing. Because I find, there's only one of me, and yes, I'm sort of near London, so lots of people can reach me there. But actually, there's lots of people all over the country. But I'm very lucky. I've got clients, in Sweden, in Belgium, in America. Okay. So it's a nice way of working. I know some people want to sort of see you and touch you and feel that you're real. So I can see people, particularly in London, but actually I do a lot of my work online. So really, if anybody does feel they need any help, just go onto the Happy Steps website, or get in touch with me, Lisa at Happy Steps, and I'll do my best to help.
Well, do you know what? I, as we say a lot on this podcast, I think anybody listening to this, it's given them lots of food for thought, and especially at this time, we're recording in March 2020, and hopefully we'll look back on this time and it'll be a crazy memory that we all have. But it's great to know that you're there to be able to help people, Lisa.
Oh, thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's been really good. Really interesting.
We put all the links and the resources on the show notes, so have a look there, and take care of yourself.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Made by darkhorsedigital.co.uk. Shooting, live streaming and podcast production.